For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On a late night in 2009, 19-year-old Rohan Deshpande, a bright film program freshman, was capturing B-roll footage deep within Manhattan's bustling Times Square 42nd Street subway corridor. He never emerged. Despite an extensive, exhaustive investigation by the NYPD and MTA, Rohan vanished without a trace after sending one last frame of neon lights to his roommate. For 8 agonizing years, his family and friends were trapped in a cruel limbo, the city's vast network offering no answers. Then, in 2017, a chance discovery was made within a discarded custodial bin, a seemingly innocuous, crushed disposable camera, and inside it, a tiny, invaluable microSD card. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Rohan Deshpande and the silent, shadowed passages of the city that swallowed him whole. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. Manhattan in the year 2009 pulsed with an energy both relentless and intoxicating, a city that rarely slept, a beacon of human endeavor. At its very heart lay Times Square, the iconic crossroads of the world, where colossal digital billboards cast an eternal twilight over the 42nd Street corridor. This vibrant, sometimes overwhelming, spectacle was a canvas for many, but for 19-year-old Rohan Deshpande, it was a classroom. A freshman in a demanding film program, Rohan possessed an insatiable curiosity for the visual narrative, his camera an extension of his own perceptive eye. His passion was raw, unadulterated, and frequently led him into the late hours, chasing the perfect shot. On the night of his disappearance, Rohan had embarked on a midnight B-roll shoot. This was not an assignment but a personal quest, an immersion into the kinetic chaos of Times Square after the main crowds had thinned. He sought to capture the electric glow of neon signs, the fleeting expressions of late-night commuters, the very essence of urban life in motion. Hours passed as he moved through the subterranean passages and street-level plazas of the Times Square 42nd complex, his lens absorbing the world around him. His last known communication was a text message, sent just after midnight, proclaiming his intention to capture one last frame of neon. It was a message that hinted at a conclusion to his nocturnal pursuit, a return to the quiet of his dorm room. Yet Rohan Deshpande never returned. In the fleeting moments that followed that final text, somewhere within the labyrinthine expanse of subway entrances and exits that honeycombed the Times Square corridor, Rohan vanished. He was a young man with a clear destination, equipped with technology that documented his passion, surrounded by a constant stream of witnesses, and yet he simply ceased to be present. The bustling backdrop that had been his inspiration had, in an instant, become the silent stage for an inexplicable disappearance. The critical questions immediately arose. Where did he go? Why did he vanish? What precisely transpired in those vital moments between his last communication and his complete absence? The answers remained hidden, swallowed by the very urban sprawl Rohan had so intently sought to capture. The morning light, usually a herald of new beginnings in New York, brought only a growing unease for Alana Pierce. Rohan Deshpande's roommate, Alana, woke to an empty bed and an unsettling quiet in their shared dorm room. Rohan, habitually an early riser despite his late-night shoots, had not returned. Her initial attempts to reach him by phone went unanswered, his calls routed directly to voicemail. Panic began to set in as hours passed without a word, a stark contrast to Rohan's usually diligent communication. By early afternoon, with no sign of him and no explanation from friends or the university, Alana made the difficult call to the police, reporting Rohan Deshpande as a missing person. The New York Police Department initiated a swift, urgent response, characteristic of a missing person report, involving a young, seemingly responsible student in a highly public area. Detectives immediately converged on the Times Square 42 St. corridor, the last known location of Rohan. Uniformed officers fanned out, interviewing anyone who might have seen him, from vendors and street performers to transit workers and late-night revelers. Missing person flyers, bearing Rohan's photograph and a description, were rapidly distributed throughout the subway stations and surrounding streets, clinging to lampposts and storefronts, their stark presence a desperate plea for information. Yet, the very environment that had drawn Rohan's artistic eye became the investigation's most formidable adversary. The Times Square 42 St. complex is a sprawling, multi-layered labyrinth of tunnels, platforms, and interconnected passages, teeming with hundreds of thousands of people daily. Surveillance cameras, while numerous, often provided only fleeting, indistinct glimpses of individuals within the constant flow of human traffic. The transient nature of the crowds meant that potential witnesses were often long gone before they could be identified. Days turned into weeks, and despite exhaustive efforts, including extensive sweeps of the subway system and analysis of Rohan's phone records, no discernible trace of him emerged. There were no witnesses to an abduction, no signs of a struggle, no discarded personal effects, and no indication of foul play. Rohan Deshpande had simply vanished, leaving behind only questions and an ever-deepening void. The initial theories ranged from a runaway scenario to an accident, but without a single piece of tangible evidence, each lead faded into a frustrating dead end. How could a person, in one of the most heavily trafficked places on Earth, disappear without a single clue? The initial fervor surrounding Rohan Deshpande's disappearance gradually yielded to a grim reality. The intensive, round-the-clock search, fueled by the urgency of a missing person in a densely populated urban center, could not sustain its initial momentum indefinitely without new leads. Days bled into weeks and weeks into months, each passing period eroding the hope that Rohan would simply reappear. The missing person flyers, once pristine and prominently displayed, became weather-beaten and torn, their message slowly fading into the background noise of the city. Police resources, initially dedicated to the active investigation, were incrementally reallocated as the trail grew colder, the absence of any tangible evidence proving insurmountable. For Rohan's roommate, Alana Pierce, and his family, this transition was an agonizing process. The initial shock gave way to a gnawing uncertainty, a void that no amount of searching or questioning could fill. Every phone call brought a flicker of false hope, every news report a renewed dread. As the months turned into a year, then two, the active investigation officially receded into the status of a cold case. Rohan Deshpande's file, once a priority on a detective's desk, was archived, joining countless others in the annals of unsolved mysteries. The collective memory of his vanishing began to dim for all but those closest to him, leaving them to grapple with a perpetual state of unresolved grief. Years continued their relentless march. 2009 became 2010, then 2011, and so on, until nearly a decade had passed since Rohan Deshpande was last seen. 8 years had elapsed since a 19-year-old film student texted about capturing one last frame of neon, and then vanished between subway entrances in Times Square. The case was not closed, but it was dormant, a lingering question mark in the city's vast criminal records. No new witnesses emerged, no anonymous tips offered credible direction, and no forensic breakthroughs materialized. The overwhelming challenge of searching a location as vast and transient as the New York subway system, coupled with the complete lack of initial clues, had rendered the investigation stagnant. Rohan Deshpande remained a ghost in the machine, a name on a list, his fate an enduring enigma that seemed destined to remain unsolved. The question of whether he would ever be found, or if the trail had gone completely cold, hung heavy over the case, a silent testament to the enduring power of an urban vanishing. For Hector Ruiz, a station cleaner navigating the vast, often grimy subterranean arteries of the Times Square 42 Cent corridor. Each shift was a rhythmic ballet of mundane tasks. Day in and day out, his gloved hands moved with practiced efficiency, sweeping discarded newspapers, forgotten coffee cups, and the endless detritus of a city in perpetual motion into his large, wheeled custodial bin. The cacophony of the subway, the ceaseless flow of commuters, and the predictable cycle of cleaning had long since rendered him impervious to surprise. His work was routine, a necessary, anonymous effort to maintain order in a chaotic environment. It was amidst this familiar refuse, on a Tuesday morning 8 years after Rohan Deshpan's disappearance, that Hector's routine was subtly, yet profoundly, interrupted. Tucked beneath a crumpled fast food wrapper and a discarded tourist map, his eye caught something unusual, a small, crushed object. It was unmistakably a disposable camera, its plastic casing cracked and its lens fractured, as if it had been stepped on or run over. Such items were not uncommon in the bins, typically remnants of a forgotten night out. But as Hector picked it up, a tiny, rectangular chip, no bigger than a fingernail, dislodged itself from the shattered remains. It was a microSD card. In a place where hundreds of thousands passed daily, where personal items were routinely lost or discarded, such a find might typically be dismissed. Yet something about its condition, the way it had been almost hidden within the crushed camera, its apparent journey through the system's waste, gave Hector pause. He recalled the faded, almost mythical memory of a missing student, a case that had haunted the station years ago. With a nascent sense of duty, Hector carefully secured the tiny chip and at the end of his shift, reported his unusual discovery to his supervisor, who in turn contacted the transit police. 8 years had passed since Rohan Deshpan vanished, and the cold case unit had long since ceased to expect any new tangible evidence. The call from transit police, detailing a crushed camera and a tiny data chip found in a custodial bin, was met with a cautious, almost disbelieving optimism. The microSD card, no bigger than a sliver of plastic, represented the first physical lead in nearly a decade. Forensic technicians handled the fragile chip with extreme care, understanding that within its minuscule memory banks might lie the answers to a long unsolved mystery, a dormant echo from the bustling heart of New York City, finally unearthed from the depths of its forgotten refuse. The call from transit police, detailing a crushed camera and a tiny data chip found in a custodial bin, was met with a cautious, almost disbelieving optimism within the NYPD's cold case unit. For 8 years, Rohan Deshpan's file had been a testament to the city's ability to swallow its inhabitants whole, a static monument to an unsolved mystery. Now, this minuscule piece of technology represented the first tangible lead in nearly a decade, igniting a spark of renewed purpose. What had been a dormant file suddenly sprang back to life, fueled by a singular, fragile object. Forensic technicians in a specialized lab received the microSD card with the reverence usually reserved for a priceless artifact. Its minuscule size belied its potential significance. The process of extraction was meticulous, a delicate dance between cutting-edge technology and the inherent fragility of a component that had endured 8 years of neglect and physical trauma. Every precaution was taken to ensure no data was lost, no fragment corrupted. Hours turned into a day as specialists worked to recover whatever digital memories might be stored within its tiny memory banks. The tension in the lab was palpable. This was not merely data recovery, but the potential resurrection of a cold case. When the first images finally materialized on the screens, a collective breath was held. The footage was grainy, flickering, and at times obscured, but its origin was unmistakable. The vibrant, chaotic tapestry of Times Square at night, precisely as it would have appeared in 2009, scrolled across the monitors. More critically, amidst the neon glow and the passing crowds, there were glimpses of Rohan Deshpan himself, his familiar face, his youthful enthusiasm captured in brief, fleeting frames. It was his camera, his footage, potentially his last known moments. The confirmation sent a ripple of excitement and grim determination through the unit. After years of silence, they finally had a direct window into Rohan's final hours. Investigators gathered, their gazes fixed on the monitor, scrutinizing every pixel. They watched the recovered footage repeatedly, searching for any and all clues. A face in the crowd, a distinctive landmark, a subtle interaction, a sudden movement. The challenge was immense. The footage was often shaky, fragmented, and incomplete, a raw, unedited stream of consciousness from a young filmmaker's perspective. It offered no clear narrative, no definitive explanation. Yet even in its imperfect state, it was a profound breakthrough. It provided context, atmosphere, and most importantly, a starting point. News of the discovery, carefully managed by authorities, eventually reached Alana Pierce. 8 years had etched a deep weariness into her spirit, the constant ache of not knowing. The call from the police, suggesting a breakthrough, was met with a complex cocktail of emotions. A surge of hope she hadn't dared to feel in years, intertwined with a profound dread of what the truth might reveal. After so long, the possibility of answers was almost as terrifying as the continued silence. The cold case had found its pulse, but the full story remained hidden within the flickering images of a lost boy's camera. The recovered footage, though fragmented and grainy, became the focal point of an intense, renewed investigation. Detectives and forensic analysts spent countless hours meticulously reviewing every second, slowing frames, enhancing details, and scrutinizing backgrounds for any overlooked anomalies. The challenge was immense. Rohan's camera, held by a novice, often captured chaotic, fleeting images. Yet, amidst the blur of passing commuters and the dizzying flash of neon, a subtle detail began to emerge from the periphery of one particular shot. In the metallic sheen of a wet wall or perhaps a polished structural beam, a faint reflection caught an analyst's eye. It was not a reflection of Rohan, nor of any identifiable person, but of a small, rectangular object. Zooming in, enhancing the pixelated image, the object resolved into what appeared to be a service gate tag, a small, coded marker typically used by transit authorities to denote maintenance, access, or temporary closures. Its presence was unusual, not prominently displayed but subtly reflected, almost as if Rohan had inadvertently captured it as he moved past. The obscure nature of this clue demanded a specific expertise, leading investigators to Greta Lynn, a renowned transit historian whose encyclopedic knowledge of New York City's subway system was unparalleled. Lynn was a living archive of MTA's labyrinthine history, intimately familiar with its blueprints, its forgotten passages, and its ever-evolving operational protocols. Greta Lynn meticulously examined the reflection of the gate tag. Her unique understanding of MTA's internal coding system allowed her to interpret the subtle variations in how such tags were affixed or rotated over time, a silent chronicle of maintenance cycles and structural alterations. She cross-referenced the tag's discernible markings, its position, and the faint contextual clues in the footage with decades of MTA work orders, structural blueprints, and historical records. It was a painstaking process, akin to deciphering an ancient language. Slowly, through her expertise, a pivotal deduction materialized. The specific tag rotation and its associated codes pointed not to an active gate, but to a location long since rendered invisible. A shuttered passage and an adjacent side stair within the vast Times Square 42 St. complex. This passage and stair, Greta Lynn explained, had been long since plated over, sealed off from public access and memory, likely during a major renovation project years before Rohan's disappearance. They existed as ghost structures within the living organism of the subway, deliberately obscured and forgotten. The realization was chilling. Rohan Despand had not vanished from a public thoroughfare, but into a hidden, forgotten corner of the city's infrastructure. The initial search, exhaustive as it was, could never have located him, for his final steps had led him into a part of the subway system that, to all outward appearances, simply did not exist. The new, urgent questions now centered on this hidden space. What had Rohan discovered or encountered within that shuttered passage? Had he fallen, or had he become irrevocably trapped in a forgotten void? With the shuttered passage and side stair precisely identified by Greta Lynn, an immediate and highly sensitive operation commenced. NYPD cold case detectives, accompanied by MTA structural engineers and emergency responders, converged on the discrete section of the Times Square 42 Sync complex. The area, seemingly an unremarkable stretch of tiled wall to the casual commuter, was now known to conceal a forgotten void. Using specialized equipment, crews began the painstaking process of care, fully peeling back the layers of plating and concrete that had sealed off the passage for decades, revealing a dark, dust-filled cavity that had once served as an active thoroughfare. The air inside was stagnant, heavy with the scent of old concrete and forgotten time. Within moments of breaching the barrier, the beam of an officer's flashlight cut through the gloom, illuminating the chilling culmination of an 8-year mystery. There, at the bottom of the long-forgotten side stair, lay the skeletal remains of Rohan Deshpande. Beside him, remarkably preserved despite the passage of time and the impact that had crushed its outer casing, was his camera, its microSD card now removed, its lens still pointed towards the unseen. The ultimate fate of the 19-year-old film student had finally been revealed. Forensic analysis of the scene, combined with the recovered footage, allowed investigators to reconstruct Rohan's final moments with a high degree of certainty. It appeared that Rohan, ever the intrepid filmmaker seeking unique perspectives, had stumbled upon an access point to the disused passage. Perhaps a service panel had been left ajar, or a section of the plating was incomplete, offering a glimpse into what he might have perceived as an intriguing, forgotten space, a perfect backdrop for his B-roll. Venturing inside, likely in pursuit of a fascinating shot or simply out of curiosity, he had navigated the initial section of the passage before encountering the side stair. In the low light, disoriented or perhaps misjudging a step, Rohan had fallen. The injury, possibly a severe head trauma, had been fatal. Unbeknownst to anyone, his body lay entombed as, sometime later, the MTA completed the final sealing of the passage, unknowingly rendering it his permanent crypt. News of the discovery reached Alana Pierce as a profound, unsettling relief. 8 years of agonizing uncertainty had given way to a stark, heartbreaking truth. The closure was absolute, yet it carried the heavy weight of what had been lost. For Rohan's family, the revelation brought an end to their endless vigil, transforming a missing person report into a tragic, if finally understood, accident. Rohan Deshpande's story became a chilling testament to the hidden dangers lurking within the vast, complex infrastructure of a modern city, a reminder that even in the most public of spaces, forgotten corners can exist, capable of swallowing lives whole. His camera, accidentally discarded and fortuitously found, had not only captured his last frames of neon, but ultimately illuminated the silent, solitary end of his journey, 8 years after he vanished into the heart of Times Square.